The heat that never forgets, before the desert learned the shape of footsteps, before fire was named and feared. The sands of Karakum already remembered. Heat here was not weather, it was judgment. It pressed downward, erased tracks, and tested whether a promise could survive when nothing else did. Among the Turkmen, an oath was not spoken lightly. Words given in fire could not be withdrawn in shadow. To break them was not simply dishonor, it was disappearance. Names vanished, stories ended mid-sentence. The desert kept what the living failed to carry. They said the Akhal-Teke was born when flame first touched muscle, when speed learned endurance and beauty learned pain. Its coat shone like polished metal, not to be admired, but to warn. This creature would not bend for anyone who did not stand firm. On the night the gate of fire burned brighter than it had in generations. A vow failed at its edge. The desert inhaled. From the heart of that flame, something moved, not fleeing, not resisting, but walking forward, unafraid. And in Karakum, that could mean only one thing. Some oaths were never meant to be kept. They were meant to burn. Chapter 1. The horse that walked through fire. The fire at Darvaza never slept. It breathed, expanded, contracted, as if the desert itself had torn open a lung and learned to live without closing it again. At night, the flames painted the dunes in moving gold and black, shadows stretching and collapsing like failed escapes. Heat rose in visible waves, bending distance, distorting truth. Men came here only when words were no longer enough. Saribek stood at the edge of the crater with his right hand pressed to his chest, fingers curled around the knot cord of his clan. The cord was old, stiff with sweat and smoke, each knot a vow made by blood long gone. His father had worn it, his grandfather before that. Tonight it weighed more than armor. Behind him, elders formed a half-circle, far enough from the heat to breathe, close enough to witness. No one spoke. In Karakum, silence was not respect, it was enforcement. The fire crackled, sparks spiraling upward like thoughts that dared not settle. Saribek stepped forward. The ritual was simple, which made it dangerous. No blade, no blood. Only truth, spoken where lies could not survive. He lifted his chin and faced the fire, feeling the skin on his cheeks tighten, his eyes sting. The heat searched him, finding hesitation like dry grass. "I swear," he began, voice steady despite the pressure, "to guard the southern wells until my breath ends, to hold the border against theft and fear, to stand where my clan has always stood." The words left his mouth cleanly, too cleanly. The elders waited for the fire to answer. At first, nothing changed. Then the flames surged inward, pulling toward the center of the crater, as if listening more closely. The sound deepened, a low roar that pressed into bone. Saribek felt it, then the flaw. Not a lie, but an omission. His vow carried duty, but not consent. He had spoken what was expected, not what he chose. The desert noticed. The fire flared white at its core, a sudden brightness that forced the elders to shield their eyes. The knot cord at Saribek's chest grew hot, then scorching. He gasped, staggered back a step. Smoke rose from the fibers. A murmur rippled through the watchers. An oath had failed. Saribek tore the cord from his neck and threw it aside, where it smoldered, blackening into nothing. Shame burned hotter than the crater. To fail here did not mean death, but it marked you. The desert would remember. So would the people. Then the fire changed again, not outward, not higher. It parted. From the center of Darvaza, hooves struck stone. Beneath the fire's roar measured, unafraid. The elders froze. No one had seen this in living memory. A horse stepped out of the crater. Its coat shone like heated bronze, veins traced with faint emberlight beneath skin that did not blister. Mane and tail flowed, dark at the roots, glowing at the tips as if dipped in flame and withdrawn unburned. Its eyes were steady, reflective, holding the fire rather than fleeing it. The fire steed. It walked forward, each step hissing as molten stone cooled beneath its hooves. Heat bent around its body, refusing to cling. The horse did not look at the elders. It did not look at the sky. It stopped before Saribek, up close. The heat was unbearable. Saribek's breath shortened, chest tight, but he did not move. He could not. The horse lowered its head slightly, close enough that Saribek felt warmth rather than pain. The fire behind them roared approval, not anger. The eldest among the watchers found her voice. "It chooses," she whispered, disbelief cracking her composure. "When an oath fails, it chooses." Saribek swallowed. "I did not keep my vow." The horse exhaled. The breath smelled of iron and smoke and something ancient. Its ears flicked not dismissal, not comfort, recognition. "You spoke a vow you could survive," the elder said, "not one you would burn for." The fire steed turned away from the crater and began to walk past Saribek toward the open desert. It did not run. It did not wait. A choice. Then, as all true ones were, Saribek took one step after it. Heat clawed at his back, but less fiercely now. Murmurs rose. This was forbidden. No one followed the fire steed. To do so was to abandon the protection of spoken oaths and stand on naked will alone. He took another step. The elder did not stop him. "She could not. If you go," she said, voice heavy, "you do not return the same." Saribek nodded. "Then I will not return false." He crossed the line where ceremony ended and consequence began. The fire receded behind him, settling back into its endless burn. The desert opened ahead, dunes rolling like frozen waves under a sky stripped of mercy. The fire steed moved steadily, unhurried, as if certain he would follow. Saribek felt something tear loose inside. Him not hope, not fear, but permission. Permission to stand without borrowed words. Behind them, the elders remained at the crater's edge, already becoming memory. Ahead lay Karakum, where broken oaths did not vanish, they hardened. And somewhere in the desert, other vows waited to be tested by fire. Chapter 2. The desert that tests silence. Karakum did not welcome movement, it absorbed it. Saribek learned this within the first hour of walking behind the fire steed. Footprints softened almost as soon as they were made, edges blurring, direction questioned. The desert did not erase him quickly. It erased him patiently, as if giving him time to reconsider whether he wished to be remembered at all. The fire steed walked without urgency, its hooves pressing shallow marks that cooled the sand rather than sinking into it. Heat shimmered around its legs, not as flame, but as restraint. Saribek followed at a measured distance, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to avoid trusting it. He had learned in a single night the danger of borrowed certainty. They moved through a plain of broken light, where mirages rose and fell like unkept promises. Saribek's throat burned. He rationed breath more than water, knowing the desert punished panic before thirst. The silence pressed in, heavy and evaluative. In Karakum, silence was not absence, it was inspection. By midday, the fire steed stopped. No signal, no warning. It simply halted, head lifting slightly as if listening to something beneath the sand. Saribek slowed and stopped as well, heart thudding. The heat here was different, denser, localized. He scanned the horizon and saw nothing but a subtle darkening of the dunes ahead, a stain where light refused to behave. "Is this where you leave me?" he asked, surprising himself by speaking aloud. The horse did not turn. Its ears flicked once. The sand ahead shifted. A shape rose not suddenly, not violently, but with the inevitability of something long decided. A pillar of darker sand coalesced, grains clinging to an invisible structure. Then arms, a torso, a head, a man formed, tall and spare, his features indistinct, eyes like embers banked low, an oath-bearer. Saribek had heard the stories as warnings told to children who spoke carelessly, those who carried vows too heavy to break and too empty to keep. They did not die, they remained. "You walk without words," the figure said, its voice dry as heat-cracked clay. "That is dangerous." "I have no words left that will not burn," Saribek replied. The oath-bearer tilted its head. "Then you are closer to truth than most." It glanced at the fire steed. "And you follow judgment without asking what it will cost." Saribek said nothing. The desert leaned in, attentive. The figure gestured, and the sand behind it parted to reveal a shallow basin ringed with blackened stone. In its center lay fragments, knotted cords, broken blades, seals melted beyond recognition. Oaths, failed and unfailed alike, reduced to residue. "This is where silence is tested," the oath-bearer said. "Speak, and the desert will measure your intent. Stay silent, and it will measure your endurance." The fire steed stepped forward, stopping at the basin's edge. It did not enter. Saribek understood. This passage was his alone. He descended into the basin. The heat intensified immediately, pressing down from above and rising from below, compressing space until movement felt deliberate, expensive. The oath-bearer circled the rim, unhurried. "Why did your vow fail?" it asked. Saribek closed his eyes. The truth rose without force, because it was safe. The heat surged. Sand hissed underfoot. He felt skin tighten, breath shorten. Why was safety unacceptable? The voice continued. "Because it preserved me," Saribek said, "at the cost of becoming smaller." The heat steadied. The pressure eased slightly. The oath-bearer nodded. Silence answers when speech does not hide. It stopped circling. "One more question. Do you intend to replace the vow you burned?" Saribek opened his eyes. He thought of the elders, the knot cord, the fire's judgment. He thought of the fire steed walking on, unconcerned with promises. "No," he said, "I intend to carry consequence without disguise." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the basin exhaled. Heat withdrew to survivable margins. The fragments at Saribek's feet cooled, their faint glow extinguishing. The oath-bearer's form began to loosen, sand slipping away. "Then you may pass," it said. "But understand this, the desert will now hold you to what you do, not what you declare. There will be no ceremony to fail next time." Saribek climbed out. His legs trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the effort of being fully present. The fire steed turned and resumed walking, accepting the outcome without acknowledgement. They traveled on as the day bent toward evening. The light softened, shadows lengthened, and the desert revealed its second face-schooler, quieter, no less demanding. In the distance, Saribek saw faint structures half buried by sand, stone arches, collapsed walls, An old well sealed with pitch, an abandoned oath settlement, long swallowed. As they passed, Saribek felt eyes on him, not watching, but remembering. Lives once built on promises that could not adapt. He understood then the deeper cruelty of Karakum. It did not punish broken oaths alone. It punished inflexible ones. Night fell without spectacle. Stars emerged, sharp and numerous, offering no guidance. The fire steed stopped near a low rise and stood facing the dark. Saribek sat on the sand at a respectful distance. He did not attempt to touch the horse. Some distances were instructive. Sleep came in fragments. In one, he stood at Darvaza again, speaking a vow that changed shape mid-sentence. In another, he stood wordless before the elders, and the fire bowed. He woke before dawn, heart steady, mind clear. The fire steed was already moving. Ahead, the desert sloped toward a region where heat glowed faintly even at night, a place where buried fire traveled under sand, feeding unseen mouths. Saribek rose and followed, knowing without certainty that the next test would not ask for silence. It would ask for endurance. Chapter 3, Where Fire Sleeps Beneath Sand. The ground began to warm long before sunrise. Not the honest heat of open flame, but a muted glow that seeped upward through layers of sand. As if the desert were dreaming of fire and could not quite wake. Saribek felt it through the soles of his boots, a low insistence that made stillness uncomfortable and rest provisional. This was a region. The caravans skirted a place where buried veins of fire traveled slowly, feeding nothing visible, answering no command. The fire steed moved with particular care here. Its hooves placed themselves with precision, avoiding thin crusts that would collapse into heat. The air around it shimmered faintly, not protective, but attentive, as though the fire beneath recognized kin above. Saribek followed, matching pace, learning to read the ground by the horse's restraint. Speed would not save him here. Awareness might. They crested a low dune and saw the sleepers. At first, Saribek thought them stones dark, irregular shapes half submerged in sand. Then one shifted, and the shape resolved into a man seated upright, head bowed, hands resting on knees. His skin was ash-gray, cracked like cooled lava, eyes closed. Another figure stood farther on, frozen mid-step, mouth open, as if to speak a word that had never arrived. There were dozens scattered across the flats, each locked in a posture of interrupted intention. Fire sleepers. Saribek had heard the name spoken only once, and then only as a warning. Those who swore vows in heat they could not sustain, who tried to outlast consequence by standing still until judgment passed. The desert granted their wish precisely. It let them stand forever. He approached cautiously. Heat radiated from the sleepers in slow pulses, synchronized with the subterranean fire's movement. They were not dead. They were preserved. At the moment their resolve failed. Saribek felt a chill despite the warmth. Did they choose this? He asked, unsure whether he spoke to the horse, the sleepers, or himself. The fire steed stopped beside the nearest figure. It lowered its head, nostrils flaring. For a moment, the buried fire brightened, sand glowing dull red in thin lines. The sleeper's chest rose once barely, then stilled again. A presence gathered behind Saribek. He turned to see a woman standing a short distance away, her face wrapped against heat, eyes sharp and steady. She wore the layered cloth of the salt caravans, colors bleached by travel. At her side stood an ordinary horse, lean and patient, shifting its weight to avoid the hottest patches of ground. You should not linger, she said. They remember attention. Saribek inclined his head. Who are you? A passer, she replied. That is enough here. Her gaze moved to the fire steed, and she stiffened despite herself. And you are not. No, Saribek agreed. They walked together for a time, keeping distance from the sleepers. The woman introduced herself as Anna, a guide who traded roots for water and silence for survival. She did not ask about the fire steed. Questions here were expensive. Why do they stand? Saribek asked at last. Anna exhaled slowly. Because they believed endurance meant refusal. They stood against fire without moving, without yielding, without changing. The desert took them at their word. She glanced at him. Standing is not the same as remaining. The fire steed paused again, ears forward. Ahead, the sand darkened into a shallow depression where heat gathered visibly, air rippling in tight patterns. At the center lay a stone platform etched with old markings of forms used before chords and ceremony when words were pressed into earth and sealed by heat. Anna stopped. I will not cross, she said. This place tests alignment, not mine. Saribek nodded. He understood. Not every path asked everyone. He approached the platform alone. The heat intensified, focused, and deliberate. The fire steed remained just outside the depression, watching without intervention. Saribek stepped onto the stone. The markings flared briefly, lines glowing amber, then settled. A voice rose not from above, but from beneath his feet, slow and resonant. State what holds you. Saribek closed his eyes. He did not search for phrasing. He answered plainly. Responsibility. The heat increased, pressing into his calves, his spine. Responsibility to whom? To consequence, he said. Not to approval. The pressure shifted, redistributing, lessening at the edges. What do you refuse? Saribek hesitated. The heat spiked sharply. Warning, without cruelty, he answered. I refuse to stand unchanged. Silence followed. The platform cooled slightly. The voice receded. When Saribek opened his eyes, the markings had dulled to stone again. The test had not crowned him. It had accepted him, stepped down. Anna watched from a distance, relief flickering across her eyes. You passed, she said. No, Saribek replied. I was not stopped. They parted soon after, trading nothing but acknowledgement. As Saribek followed the fire steed onward, the sleepers receded into the heat haze, their forms blurring back into the desert's inventory of lessons. By evening, the buried fire thinned, replaced by cooler sands and longer shadows. Saribek felt the cumulative cost of the day settle into his muscles, a clean fatigue that did not ask to be ignored. The fire steed slowed, allowing rest without signaling permission. They camped without flame, the horses' warmth sufficient. As night deepened, Saribek stared at the stars, thinking of the sleepers, of vows that mistook rigidity for strength. He understood now the danger ahead was not breaking an oath, nor keeping one too long. It was mistaking stillness for integrity. At dawn, the horizon glowed faintly not with fire, but with the promise of an oasis long abandoned, where water and heat had once negotiated peace. The fire steed rose and moved toward it. Saribek followed, knowing the next trial would ask not what he could endure, but what he would release. Chapter 4. The oasis that refused names. The oasis revealed itself reluctantly, as if uncertain whether memory still justified form. Palm trunks rose first from the shimmer, dark and skeletal, their fronds sparse and unmoving. Then the basin emerged, shallow bowl of cracked clay, ringed by stones, arranged with care that had outlived its makers. Water remained, but only barely, a narrow pool at the center, clear and still, reflecting the sky without invitation. Saribek felt the change before he reached the shade. The heat here was not diminished, it was redistributed. It pressed downward in a steady, administrative way, as if the land had learned to manage suffering efficiently. The fire steed slowed and stopped at the basin's edge. It did not drink. It did not step closer. Its ears angled outward, measuring. Abandoned places had rules. This one enforced them without speech. The stones around the pool were etched with symbols worn smooth by hands and repetition. Saribek recognized fragment-sold clan marks, route signs, tally lines used by caravans to mark arrival and departure. Names had been here once, spoken daily, tied to water and shade. Now they had been erased, not by time, but by refusal. Someone had decided that names were the problem. Saribek knelt and dipped his fingers into the pool. The water was cool, startlingly so, as if drawn from depth rather than gathered from chance. He drank sparingly, then stood. The fire steed watched, unmoved. "You may rest," said a voice from the palms, "but you may not remain." Saribek turned. 3 figures stepped into view, their robes pale, faces wrapped. They carried no weapons, only flat wooden tokens marked with grooves that caught the light. Namekeepers. He had heard of them, communities that abandoned identity to survive prolonged conflict. No names, no claims, no inherited grudges. They endured by erasure. "We keep this place," the nearest said. "It is neutral. It forgets those who ask it to." Saribek met her gaze. At what cost? She inclined her head. Continuity. They gestured to the basin. "Drink, rest, and leave your name with us. You will pass unseen thereafter. The desert will not test what it cannot identify." The offer was precise, tempting. Saribek felt the fatigue in his limbs, the accumulated weight of heat and consequence. To pass unseen meant safety without surrender to fire. It meant survival without spectacle. He looked at the fire steed. It had turned its head away from the pool. "I will rest," Saribek said, "but I will not leave a name." The namekeepers exchanged glances, unperturbed. "You misunderstand," the second said. "We do not take names, we dissolve them. What remains is function." Saribek considered the sleepers, the basin of fragments, the platform that tested alignment. "Function without accountability becomes repetition," he said. "I will carry mine." The nearest namekeeper studied him longer now. "Then the oasis will test you differently." They withdrew into the shade. The air tightened, subtle but immediate. The pool's surface rippled without wind. The stones hummed faintly, a vibration that crept into Saribek's bones. He felt pressure behind his eyes, a pulling sensation, as if the place were attempting to unfasten something essential. Images surfaced unbidden: Darvaza's fire, the elders' faces, the knot cord burning. The oasis pressed harder, trying to smooth edges, to blur specificity. Forgetting, he realized, was its defense mechanism. He grounded himself, feet planted, breath steady. He spoke aloud, not a name, but an admission. "I am responsible for what follows me." The hum faltered. The pressure eased slightly, then surged again, targeting another seam. The oasis was thorough. The fire steed stepped forward at last, placing one hoof onto the clay. The ground did not crack, heat did not spike. The horse lowered its head toward the pool, not to drink, but to exhale. Warm breath touched the water. Steam rose in a thin veil, distorting reflections. The namekeepers reappeared, startled. "It does not belong here," one said. "It belongs where judgment is honest," Saribek replied. He felt the alignment settle: fire above, water below, heat negotiated by presence rather than avoidance. The oasis made its final attempt, the water stilled completely, becoming a perfect mirror. In it, Saribek saw himself as he would be, without names, efficient, unmarked, moving easily through the desert, without resistance. The image was seductive. It promised longevity. He broke the reflection by stepping into the pool. Cold shocked his ankles. The water darkened, stirred by motion. The mirror shattered into ripples that refused coherence. The stone's hum ceased. The namekeepers bowed their heads, not in defeat, but recognition. "Then you will pass, remembered," the nearest said, "and therefore tested again." Saribek stepped out, boots heavy with water. The fire steed turned and walked away from the basin, not waiting. Saribek followed, leaving wet footprints that lingered longer than expected before fading. By late afternoon, the palms vanished behind them, and the desert resumed its broader arguments. Saribek felt changed, not relieved, but clarified. Forgetting was not rest, it was abdication. As evening approached, the land ahead darkened into broken ridges where wind began to move with intent again, carrying ash from distant burns. The fire steed's pace lengthened slightly, anticipation coiled in its posture. He did not know what awaited beyond the ridges, only that it would not offer erasure. He welcomed that. Behind them, the oasis settled back into neutrality, keeping what it could not dissolve: the memory of a man who chose to be tested rather than passed over. Ahead, the desert prepared its next measure. Chapter 5. The Wind That Counts. The living by nightfall, the ridges rose like a ledger of broken lines, each crest scored by wind into figures that refused easy reading. The fire steed led without hesitation, choosing a narrow defile where the air funneled downward and gathered speed, carrying with it the faint taste of ash and iron. Saribek felt the wind before he heard Eton intelligence in motion, not violent but attentive, brushing his skin as if taking inventory. This was not the wind of names, which the elders said learned who you were and decided accordingly. This was older. This wind counted. Breath by breath, step by step, it tallied those who moved through its reach, and adjusted the land's response with dispassionate care. They entered the defile at a steady pace. Stone walls rose on either side, close enough that Saribek could touch both if he spread his arms. The wind accelerated, flattening sound and stretching time. His thoughts narrowed to cadence: heel, toe, inhale, exhale. Match the fire steed's rhythm without chasing it. Ahead, the horse's mane burned low, a contained glow that resisted being pulled into the current. The first marker appeared as a stack of stones set into a recess, each stone etched with a short vertical line. Saribek recognized the pattern. Traveler counts, not graves, not milestones. Accounting. He slowed, counted the lines: 17, then another stack: 20. The difference was the story. Fewer left than entered. The wind rose another degree, now speaking in a thin, constant tone that pressed against his ears. He felt it measure his breathing, testing for irregularity. He steadied himself, lengthened his stride to smooth the pattern. The fire steed adjusted to its hooves, placing with exact economy, neither rushing nor resisting. Midway through the defile, the path widened into a bowl-shaped hollow, where the wind circled rather than passed through. The air there was dense, almost liquid, carrying whispers that were not words, but numbers, pronounced with ritual patience. Saribek felt the urge to stop, to rest in the hollow's deceptive calm. He resisted, counting winds, punished stillness. A figure emerged from the far side, walking against the flow with deliberate difficulty. The man's cloak was heavy with dust, his face lined not by age but by recalculation. He carried a staff marked with notches more precise than the stones, more personal. "Do not linger," the man said, voice flattened by the wind. "It will add you twice." Saribek inclined his head and kept moving. "You count for it." The man smiled without warmth. "It counts for itself. I only keep the margin." They passed each other shoulder to shoulder. The man did not look at the fire steed. He did not need to. Some truths are counted without being seen. Beyond the hollow, the defile narrowed again, then opened abruptly onto a plateau scraped bare. The wind there struck from the side, sharp and corrective, forcing alignment. Saribek leaned into it, adjusting his angle until the pressure evened. The fire steed turned its head slightly, mane flaring as if acknowledging a peer. The wind did not bow, it never did. At the plateau's center stood a ring of posts driven deep into the rock, each wrapped with strips of cloth faded to the color of bone. Counting flags. When the wind passed through them, they snapped in sequence, a metronome of survival. Miss the sequence, and you lost time. Lose time, and the land would charge interest. Saribek stepped into the ring and matched his pace to the flags. The fire steed circled the outer edge, counterbalancing. The wind pressed harder, testing synchronization. Saribek felt a momentary hitch fatigue tugging at his timing. He corrected immediately, shortening his step, smoothing the breath. The flags resumed their rhythm. A sound broke through the wind, a cough, distant and thin. Saribek turned. At the plateau's edge, a woman knelt beside a fallen pack, struggling to rise. The wind battered her, counting mercilessly. Each failed attempt added another mark to an invisible ledger. The fire steed stopped. Its mane brightened, the glow sharpening. Saribek knew the risk. To intervene was to change the count. The wind would not forgive imbalance. It would demand payment elsewhere. He moved anyway. Approaching from the upwind side, he placed himself between the woman and the force, taking the brunt. He timed his steps to the flags, even as he bent to offer his arm. "On three," he said, keeping his voice low and even. "Match my breath." She nodded, eyes wide but focused. They rose together, the wind slamming into Saribek's shoulder. Pain flared, then settled into a dull line. He adjusted, shifting weight until the pressure redistributed. The fire steed stepped closer, adding its mass to the equation without entering the ring. They walked her out of the counting space, each step a negotiation. At the edge, the wind's tone changed, subtracting rather than adding. The woman sagged, then steadied. "It took my brother," she said, not accusing, simply reporting. "Counted him wrong." Saribek did not answer. He watched the flags. The sequence held. The wind eased, satisfied with the revised tally. It had not been cheated, it had been answered. The plateau quieted into a lower register, still alert, but no longer corrective. They continued on as darkness gathered, the land unfolding into open ground where the wind resumed a traveling pace. Saribek felt the ache in his shoulder. Deponadet acknowledged. He accepted it. Freedom, he was learning, was not the absence of accounting. It was choosing what you were willing to pay. Ahead, The fire steed quickened, drawn toward a faint glow on the horizon, neither fire nor city, but something steady and deliberate. Saribek followed, breath aligned, steps counted, carrying with him the knowledge that the wind would remember the adjustment. It always did. Chapter 6. The measure of ash. The glow on the horizon did not flicker like flame, nor waver like heat haze. It held its distance with disciplined patience, a fixed point against the desert's habit of deception. As Saribek and the fire steed approached, the air thickened with the fine grit of old burn. Ash ground so small it no longer remembered what it had been. Each step lifted a pale whisper that clung to skin and cloth alike, marking passage without spectacle. This was a place the elders named only by gesture, a downward turn of the palm, a pause before speech resumed. The measure, where fires were not worshipped, only accounted for. The land here lay flat and wide, interrupted by low mounds arranged in deliberate intervals. At first glance, they appeared natural wind-shaped drifts, hardened by time, but closer inspection revealed the geometry beneath. Each mound was capped with a shallow basin of blackened stone, some empty, others holding a thin layer of ash, so uniform it might have been poured. Saribek slowed. These were not remnants of disaster, they were records. The fire steed halted at the first basin and lowered its head. Its mane dimmed to a steady ember, neither warning nor invitation. Saribek approached and knelt, running his fingers through the ash. It was cool. Whatever had burned here had long since finished its argument with the air. He recalled a lesson given without words, his father's hand guiding his over a hearth after a feast. Not to feel heat, but absence. Ash was not the end of fire. It was the proof that something had been consumed fully enough to leave no claim behind. A voice carried across the plain, low and even. Count before you cross. Saribek rose. A line of figures stood between the mounds, spaced with the same care as the basins. Men and women in ash-colored wraps, faces uncovered, eyes clear. None bore weapons. Each held a shallow tray, etched with marks, similar to those on the counting stones of the defile, but broader, more patient. We cross to where Saribek asked. To where the fire forgets your name, the speaker replied, or remembers it correctly. That depends on what you bring. Saribek glanced at the fire steed. The horse remained still, its presence altering the air without demanding attention. What is measured here? The speaker inclined her head. What you burned and what you did not. They gestured to the basins. Step to the mound that fits. Saribek moved along the line, reading the basins as one reads weather. Some held ash so light it dispersed at a breath. Others were dense, clotted, resistant to disturbance. He stopped before a basin whose ash lay thin but uneven, streaked as if something had tried to rise and failed. He placed his palm above it and felt not heat, but a pull, subtle and insistent. A memory surfaced, unbidden. The night of the broken oath at the gate of fire. The words he had not spoken because speaking them would have bound him beyond retreat. The silence that followed. The burn that did not mark skin, but hollowed resolve. This one, he said. The speaker nodded once. Then you must add what is missing. They handed him a small pouch, heavy despite its size. Inside was charcoal, freshly made, edges sharp. Burn something willingly, she said. Not as penance, as completion. Saribek looked at the fire steed. Its mane flared briefly, then settled. The horse would not decide for him. It never did. He considered his pack, water, cloth, a blade kept sharp but clean. He thought of his shoulder, still aching from the winds, accounting. He reached instead for the leather thong at his neck and drew out a small ring of bone, smoothed by years of touch, his brother's, taken from a failed trade long ago. He had carried it as a reminder not to trust easy bargains. He set the ring in the basin. The speaker struck flint, and fire caught with unceremonious speed. The bone blackened, then cracked, releasing a scent that tightened the chest. Saribek did not look away. When the flame died, the ash lay level at last. The wind shifted, not counting now, but observing. The measure had been satisfied. "You may cross," the speaker said, "but know this, what you burned will not answer you again." Saribek nodded. He felt no relief, only alignment. The fire steed stepped forward, hooves placing between mounds without disturbing them, as if aware of the interval's significance. Saribek followed, careful and exact. Halfway across, a tremor passed through the ground, not violent, but deliberate. Ash in nearby basins stirred, then settled. One of the figures along the line stiffened, eyes narrowing. Someone carries heat they refuse to name. A cry rose from the far edge. A young man stumbled into view, clothes scorched, breath ragged. He clutched a bundle wrapped in cloth, smoke seeping through his fingers. "I can't let it go," he said, voice breaking. "If I burn it, I lose her." The speaker's expression softened, but did not change. "If you don't," she replied, "the fire will choose its own moment." The man looked at Saribek, desperation sharp as a blade. The fire steed turned its head, mane brightening to a warning glow. This was not their account to settle. Saribek spoke quietly. "Fire keeps what is fed to it. It never returns exact shapes." The man hesitated, then knelt at a basin, hands shaking. He opened the bundle of braid of hair, dark and carefully tied. He placed it in the stone and struck flint with a sob. The flame took quickly, cleanly. When it finished, the man sagged, emptied but upright. The tremor passed. The ash stilled. On the far side of the measure, the land rose gently, the air clearer. The glow ahead resolving into a line of steady light along the ground, a path traced not by flame, but by reflection. The fire steed moved toward it, purpose renewed. Saribek crossed the last interval and felt the shift. A subtraction completed, a balance restored. He touched the hollow at his neck, where the ring had been, and found not loss, but space room for something that would not burn so easily. Behind them, the counters resumed their vigil. Trey's steady eyes, patient. The measure did not judge, it recorded. Ahead, the path waited, bright enough to follow without demanding belief. Saribek set his pace to the fire steed and stepped into the reflected light, carrying less than beforehand, knowing precisely why. Chapter 7. The road that refuses the rider. The reflected path did not welcome speed. It accepted only steadiness, a pace that neither begged nor boasted. Saribek learned this within the first mile. When he urged himself forward, the light dulled and thinned, as if offended by haste. When he slowed too much, it fractured into scattered glints that offered no direction. The fire steed understood at once. It set a cadence that felt almost ordinary, an insult to legend, yet the ground beneath its hooves answered with quiet affirmation. Here, the desert changed its posture. The Karakum no longer rose to challenge or flattened itself to erase. It inclined, subtle and precise, shaping a road that existed only while respected. Saribek felt it underfoot, a firmness that withdrew the moment he tested it for advantage. This was not a road made to be ridden. It was a road that refused the rider's arrogance. The air cooled slightly, not from mercy, but from altitude. Low ridges flanked the path, their surfaces polished by wind into long planes that caught the light and bent it forward. The glow did not originate from a single source. It was borrowed, reflected, passed along like a careful rumor. Saribek wondered how many had mistaken it for an invitation and learned otherwise. He remembered an old saying, spoken rarely and without emphasis. Some paths exist to measure the man who would cross them, not to help him arrive. He felt measured now, counted like the wind had done, not balanced like the ash butt assessed, as one might test metal by flex rather than strike. They encountered the first markers at dusk, narrow stakes driven deep into the ground, each capped with a ring of dull bronze. No inscriptions, no symbols of warning, only the rings, identical in size, placed at irregular intervals that resisted pattern. Saribek reached to touch one. The metal was cool, heavy with use. "Leave it," said a voice from the shadow of a ridge. A rider emerged slowly, mounted on a horse lean enough to look unfinished. The animal's coat bore no sheen, no fire. Its eyes were steady and unadorned. The rider wore plain wraps and a helm scarred by repair. He stopped a respectful distance away. "These rings are not for hands," the rider continued. "They're for decisions." Saribek lowered his arm. "What do they decide?" "Whether you think the road owes you passage." The rider's gaze flicked to the fire steed and returned without comment. "Most do. And you?" Saribek asked. "I thought so once." The rider smiled, thin and rueful. "It disabused me." They rode together for a time, the reflected path holding steady between them. The rider spoke sparingly, as if aware that words added weight the road might resent. He explained the rings. Each marked a place where the road had ended for someone who tried to master it by force, by ritual, by speed. The ring was set not to honor failure, but to close the account. No one passed the same way twice. "Why ride at all, then?" Saribek asked. The rider considered. "Because walking pretends you are humble. Riding admits you are not." The fire steed snorted softly, mane dim but attentive. The road did not waver. At the third ring, the rider slowed and stopped. "This is as far as I go." He dismounted and pressed his palm briefly to the bronze cap. "My measure ends here." Saribek inclined his head. "What lies ahead?" "Ownership," the rider said. "Not of land, of consequence." He turned away without farewell, leading his horse into the shadow where the light did not follow. The path narrowed, and the reflected glow sharpened, demanding accuracy. Night settled fully. Stars appeared, sharp and unsentimental, their reflections stitching the ground ahead into a precise seam. Saribek felt fatigue gather, not as weakness, but as distraction. The road punished distraction. He focused on breath, on the fire steed's even placement, on the distance between rings. A sudden sound broke the discipline. Hooves behind, fast and careless. A group approached at speed. 3 riders, their mounts glossy with sweat, eyes bright with ambition. They laughed as they drew near, confident in numbers and momentum. "Make way," one called. "We'll show you how this path is taken." They surged past, spurring hard. The reflected light flared briefly, then dimmed. The riders shouted, anger rising as the road fragmented beneath them into false lines that led nowhere. One horse stumbled, another reared. A ring ahead glowed faintly, then dulled. The road did not intervene, it simply refused. Saribek and the fire steed passed the wreckage without comment. One rider knelt, cursing the ground, as if insult might coerce it. Another stared at the ring in disbelief, as if betrayed by an agreement he had imagined. Further on, the path climbed gently toward a rise where the reflected light pooled into a narrow band. The fire steed slowed, mane brightening to a warning. Saribek felt it to a thinning, as if the road were deciding whether to continue at all. At the crest stood a final marker, larger than the others, its bronze ring worn smooth by many palms. Beyond it, darkness unrelieved by reflection. No glow waited there, only the suggestion of continuation. Saribek dismounted. The road held beneath his feet, but only just. He approached the ring and did not touch it. He remembered the measure, the ash leveled by choice. He remembered the wind's accounting, the price paid willingly. He understood now, this road required neither sacrifice nor speed. It required consent to arrive without guarantee. He stepped past the ring. The reflected light did not follow. Instead, a new brightness kindled at the fire steed's mane, contained, steady, sufficient. It was not a torch for others. It was enough for one. Behind him, the road closed, smooth and unmarked, refusing nostalgia. Ahead, the darkness accepted them without resistance. Saribek mounted, set the pace the road would tolerate even when unseen, and rode on, knowing that from this point forward, arrival would no longer be evidence of worth, only of responsibility. Chapter 8. The city that breathes heat. The darkness beyond the road was not empty. It had volume, weight, and a temperature that pressed inward rather than down. Saribek felt it first, in his lungs, a dry resistance that turned each breath into a deliberate act. The fire steed's mane provided just enough light to reveal the next few steps, nothing more. This was not a place to be surveyed. It was a place to be entered. The ground changed underfoot, hardening from sand to packed clay, scored with channels like veins. Heat traveled through them in slow pulses, as if the land itself inhaled and exhaled. With each pulse, a low sound rose and fell, too deep to be called a hum, too steady to be wind. Saribek realized he was hearing a city before seeing it. They crested a shallow rise, and the darkness parted into structure. Walls emerged broad, sloped plains of dark stone that caught and returned heat with patient efficiency. Towers rose without ornament, their silhouettes softened by warmth rather than light. Between them ran corridors of shadow, threaded with the glow of embers set flush into the ground. No flames, only stored fire, disciplined and contained. The city of heat did not announce itself, it breathed. Saribek dismounted at the threshold, feeling the pressure of attention without spectacle. No guards challenged him, no gates barred passage. The city's first test was simpler. Whether he would enter as if owed welcome. He did not. He waited, letting the fire steed's light settle to a low, respectful glow. A figure approached, steps unhurried, heat rippling faintly around them. The woman's skin bore the matte sheen of long exposure. Her eyes reflected ember light without flinching. She wore no insignia, only a cord at her waist marked by small knotscounts, not ranks. You come from the road that refuses, she said. That narrows the kind of trouble you bring. I bring none I can't carry, Saribek replied. She studied him, then the fire steed. Her gaze lingered there, measuring not power but containment. Then follow. Walk where the ground tells you to step. The streets guided them subtly. Channels of heat drawing feet along paths that avoided crossing flows at the wrong angle. Saribek felt the city's breath through his soles, learned to pause when it exhaled and move when it drew in. The fire steed matched the rhythm effortlessly, hooves placing with the confidence of something that understood furnaces and restraint. They passed workshops sunk into the stone, open to the air. Within, artisans worked metal that glowed dull red, never bright enough to dazzle. No hammers rang. Pressure and patience shaped the steel, coaxing it rather than forcing. Saribek recognized the philosophy at once. Heat applied evenly over time until resistance became cooperation. This city was built where fire could not escape, the woman said, anticipating his question. So it learned to stay. They reached a central basin-wide depression where heat pooled into a visible shimmer. At its edge stood a ring of seated elders, each with a bowl of water that steamed gently. They did not look up as Saribek approached. "He carries the fire steed," the guide said to them, contained. One elder raised a finger, stirring his bowl. "Containment is a skill, not a virtue. What do you want, rider?" Saribek considered his answer carefully. The city listened for shape, not sentiment. "I want to know what heat remembers when names fail." The elder nodded once. "Then you will learn what it forgets." They instructed him to stand at the basin's edge and remove his cloak. The heat rose, not searing, but invasive, finding old injuries, old hesitations. Saribek felt his shoulder ache sharpen, then settle. The fire steed stepped back, mane dimming further, refusing to interfere. "Heat strips intention," the elder said. "What remains is habit." Images surfaced unbidden, moments where Saribek had chosen the efficient path over the honorable one, where he had waited for others to decide and then followed. None were crimes, all were patterns. "Speak one," the elder commanded. Saribek spoke of the night he let a dispute fester because resolution would have cost him standing. The heat pressed harder, then eased. "Now unlearn it," the elder said. "How?" Saribek asked. "By choosing its opposite when it costs you more." The basin's shimmer steadied. The city exhaled, approving not the confession, but the commitment. A tremor ran through the ground. Somewhere deeper, heat shifted roots. The guide's eyes narrowed. "The city adjusts," she murmured. "Someone brings uncontained fire." A shout echoed from a far corridor, followed by the crack of metal stressed beyond patience. The elders rose as one, bowls set aside. "The gate of fire remembers," the elder said quietly. "It always does." They turned to Saribek. "You will go." He did not ask why. The fire steed stepped forward, mane brightening just enough to cut through the city's breath without igniting it. As they moved, Saribek understood the city's lesson. Heat could be stored, guided, shared if one accepted the discipline it demanded. Freedom without discipline burned. Discipline without freedom suffocated. The city survived by breathing between the two. At the far edge, a gate yawned open to the night, its stones warm and waiting. Beyond it, a distant glow pulsed, not the steady reflection of the road, but the living brightness of flame, remembering its origin. Saribek mounted, the city's breath at his back, and rode toward the place where containment would be tested against origin, knowing the next account would not be settled by ash alone. Chapter 9: The Gate That Remembers Fire. The gate stood apart from the city, not because it was forbidden, but because it was complete. Heat pooled around it in a way that made edges blur and distances lie. The stones were fused glass and basalt, seams sealed by pressure rather than mortar. Saribek felt the gate before he reached it, the familiar tightening in the chest that came when a place remembered you before you remembered it. This was not the darvaza, of open flame that travelers named and feared. That gate burned for spectacle and warning. This one burned inward. It remembered origins. The fire steed slowed, mane dimming to a low, resolute glow. It would go no closer without being asked. Saribek dismounted and approached alone, the ground warm enough to soften leather soles. With each step, images rose and receded. Sparks struck in desperation. Fires fed to prove courage. Embers guarded through nights of doubt. The gate gathered them without comment. A figure waited at the threshold, wrapped in layered cloth darkened by long exposure. His face was lined not by age, but by recurrence. He had stood here many times, Saribek sensed, and the gate had counted him sufficient. "You returned," the keeper said, voice steady, unadorned. "I didn't leave," Saribek replied. "Not properly." The keeper inclined his head. "Then enter properly." The gate did not open. It did not need to. Heat drew aside, creating a corridor of pressure that invited passage without promise. Saribek stepped into it and felt the familiar night from years ago press close, the moment when he had chosen silence over binding words. The gate sharpened the memory until it lost its excuses. "Speak what you withheld," the keeper said. Saribek drew breath. The air resisted, then yielded. He spoke the words he had once swallowed, an oath of responsibility, not victory, of repair, not dominance. As he spoke, heat surged, not to burn, but to test integrity. The words held. The corridor widened. Beyond, the gate's interior revealed itself as a chamber shaped by repeated passage. The floor bore impressions of feet and hooves, not worn away but impressed deeper with each crossing. Firelight moved along the walls like a living archive, scenes igniting briefly before dimming. Those who had entered seeking absolution and found none. Those who had entered seeking power and been stripped to their habits. A few who had entered seeking nothing but alignment and left changed. At the chamber's center stood a shallow pit lined with glassy stone. Within it lay coals, no flame, only potential. The keeper gestured. "Add what the city taught you." Saribek knelt. He understood now. This was not the measure of ash, where something ended. This was the recall, where something returned in altered form. He reached to the hollow at his neck, where space remained after burning the bone ring. He placed his hand over the pit and breathed until the coals responded, faintly brightening. "I add discipline," he said, and the coals glowed steadier. "Not to cage fire, but to let it endure." The keeper nodded. "Then take what you can carry." From the pit rose a heat thread, thin as wire, bright without flame. It coiled toward Saribek's wrist. Hesitating, he extended his arm. The thread settled, neither binding nor branding, simply present. He felt its weight immediately, not heavy, but consequential. This was not a weapon. It was a reminder that fire remembered agreements. Outside, the fire steed stamped once, sensing the shift. Its mane brightened in response to the thread, harmonizing without flaring. The gate exhaled, satisfied. As they emerged, the night beyond the gate felt altered, clearer, as if excess heat had been accounted for. The keeper remained at the threshold, already fading back into recurrence. "Where does this road lead?" Saribek asked. "It doesn't," the keeper replied. "You do." They rode out into open desert, where the city's breath no longer guided steps, and the road's reflection no longer offered discipline. Here, choice returned without scaffolding. The fire steed set a pace that invited adjustment rather than obedience. They encountered signs of pursuit before the pursuers themselves: disturbed sand, Heat displaced too quickly, the acrid tang of fire pushed rather than carried. Saribek recognized the pattern uncontained flame, driven by will rather than patience. The gate's lesson sharpened into relevance. At dawn they were met by a line of figures cresting a low ridge, torches flaring despite the light. Their leader rode forward, face hard with certainty. "You carry what was not given to you," he called. "Fire belongs to those who take it." Saribek did not answer at once. He felt the heat thread at his wrist tighten slightly, a prompt rather than a command. He remembered the city's basin, the elder's instruction to choose the opposite when it cost more. "Fire belongs to those who keep it," Saribek said finally. "Taking is easy. Holding changes you." The leader laughed and spurred forward. The others followed, torches whipping the air into angry eddies. The fire steed moved not away, not toward, but into alignment with the ground's subtle incline. Saribek guided it to a place where heat pooled naturally, then stopped. He did not draw a blade. He raised his wrist and let the heat thread catch the morning light. It did not blaze, it clarified. The torches faltered as their heat was invited into the ground's patient channels, drawn away from spectacle into storage. Flames shortened, then steadied, robbed of excess. Confusion rippled through the riders. Their leader reigned in anger, giving way to calculation. Fire that could not be displayed lost its authority. "This ends now," Saribek said, and meant not victory but closure. The leader hesitated, then turned aside. One by one, the others followed, torches dimming to coals as they left the natural pools. When the ridge emptied, the desert exhaled. The fire steed lowered its head, mane settling into a contained glow that felt earned. Saribek rode on, understanding that the gate had not armed him. It had returned to him what he had once withheld: words, discipline, and the willingness to let fire remember him correctly. Ahead, the land sloped toward a wide basin where heat shimmered in a different register, broader, communal. Saribek sensed the approach of a reckoning that would involve more than his own account. The desert, patient and exacting, prepared to breathe again. Chapter 10. The Oath That Survives the Fire. The basin opened before them like a held breath, finally released. Heat shimmered across its width in layered sheets, not chaotic but organized, as if the land had rehearsed this exchange many times. Paths of darker stone threaded the basin floor, guiding heat into channels that met at a central rise. There, a ring of low pillars stood equidistant, their tops worn smooth by hands that had learned where to rest. Saribek dismounted at the basin's edge. The fire steed remained close, mane steady, a contained presence rather than a beacon. He felt the heat thread at his wrist warm, responding to proximity, reminding him that this place would not accept improvisation. Figures gathered along the channels, families, artisans, riders, counters from the measure. A few elders from the city of heat. They stood without banners, without ranks. This was not an assembly called by authority. It was a convergence prompted by necessity. Heat had drawn them, and heat would record what followed. An elder stepped forward, carrying a bowl of coals that glowed without flame. "This basin holds what we share," she said. "When oaths fail, heat scatters. When oaths endure, heat returns." She set the bowl on the central rise. The coals brightened slightly, then steadied. "We will speak one oath," she continued. "Not many. One that can survive fire." A murmur moved the gathered. Saribek felt the familiar tightening woods had shaped his life by absence as much as by presence. The fire steed shifted its weight, attentive but neutral. The elder looked to Saribek. "You carry the recall," she said, nodding to the heat thread, "not as ownership, as witness. Will you stand in the center?" Saribek stepped onto the rise. Heat pressed gently, testing alignment. He felt the basin's attention focus not on him, but through him, as if he were a conduit rather than a subject. "Speak what you will bind," the elder said. Saribek breathed, feeling the heat thread settle. He did not craft a promise of victory or protection. He remembered the city's lesson, the road's refusal, the wind's accounting. "I bind us to return heat to where it belongs," he said, "to store what we draw, to answer for what we release. When we cannot keep an oath, we will name its breaking before the fire does." The basin went very still. Heat gathered, then flowed evenly along the channels. The coals flared once, then subsided. This was not applause, it was acceptance. One by one, those gathered stepped forward and placed a hand briefly on a pillar. No words were spoken. Each contact transferred a small, precise warmth, enough to register, not enough to burn. The pillars glowed faintly, recording participation without hierarchy. A disturbance rippled at the basin's edge. The leader from the ridge appeared, alone now, torch unlit. He halted, uncertainty clear in his posture. "Will you stand apart?" the elder asked him. He hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know how to keep what I take." Saribek met his gaze. "Then learn where to return it." The man stepped forward and placed his hand on a pillar. The glow there was uneven, then smoothed. Heat did not judge, it corrected. As the last hand withdrew, the basin exhaled. The channels cooled, not to absence, but to readiness. The fire steed's mane brightened briefly, then settled lower than before, a sign of shared load. The elder lifted the bowl and poured the coals into the ground. They vanished without smoke. "The oath is not mine to keep," she said. "It is ours to remember." Night fell with unusual gentleness. Fires kindled around the basin, small and disciplined. Stories were told without embellishment. Heat moved among them, accepted and returned. Saribek stood at the edge with the fire steed, watching the basin hold. He felt the heat thread loosen slightly, its weight redistributed among many wrists unseen. This, he understood, was the difference between a vow and a culture. At dawn, the basin emptied quietly. People departed along their channels, carrying warmth, measured and sufficient. The pillars dimmed, retaining only the memory of contact. Saribek mounted and turned toward the open desert. The fire steed set a pace that felt lighter, not faster, but shared. The oath would be tested elsewhere, by time and strain. Fire would remember. As they rode, Saribek felt no triumph, only readiness. Ahead, the land narrowed into a passage where heat and wind crossed at difficult angles. He sensed the approach of a final accounting, not of flame alone, but of choice under pressure. The fire steed lifted its head, mane brightening to a calm, decisive glow. The desert, faithful to its nature, prepared one last test. Chapter 11. The trial where fire cannot follow. The passage narrowed until the desert seemed to fold inward. Stone and sand pressed into a corridor where heat and wind crossed without blending. Here, warmth did not flow, it stalled. Here, air did not travel. It struck and withdrew. The fire steed slowed of its own accord, mane dimming to a faint, disciplined ember. This was a place where flame was tolerated only as memory. Saribek dismounted. Instinct told him the fire steed would not enter what lay ahead, not because it could not, but because it must not. Some trials rejected fire, not as enemy, but as witness. What followed required the absence of glow. The horse lowered its head once, a gesture neither farewell nor refusal. It would wait. It always did. Saribek stepped forward alone. The corridor opened into a basin of pale stone, its surface etched with shallow grooves that carried neither heat nor ash. The air here was cold, not cooling, but cold by design. It stripped warmth without malice, exposing breath as visible proof of life. At the basin's center stood 3 figures, their outlines sharp against the emptiness. They wore no protection against the chill, the unwarmed. Saribek had heard of them only indirectly, mentioned when fires failed to answer prayers. Those who kept watch where heat could not reach, ensuring that judgment did not confuse endurance with righteousness. "You come carrying heat," one said, voice level. "Leave it." Saribek felt the heat thread at his wrist tighten, then slacken. He unwound it carefully and laid it on the stone. It dimmed at once, becoming inert, neither tool nor symbol. "Now," the second figure said, "you will be tested without what you have learned to trust." The wind rose not, the counting wind, not the guiding wind, but a stripping current that peeled intention from action. Images flashed and vanished. The basin oath, the city's discipline, the gate's recall. Each lesson was taken away as quickly as it appeared. "What remains?" the third asked. Saribek answered without thinking. "Choice." They nodded. The basin shifted. Grooves deepened, forming paths that diverged and rejoined unpredictably. The air thickened, resisting movement unevenly. No direction announced itself. No rhythm offered alignment. "This place breaks leaders," the first, unwarmed, said. "They look for response." Saribek stepped onto the stone. Immediately, the cold bit through his boots, climbed his legs, settled into bone. He moved anyway, choosing a path not because it seemed right, but because it required commitment. Halfway across, the ground subtly inclined, testing balance. He adjusted, slowed, refused the urge to correct too quickly. A voice rose from nowhere. "If you fall, fire cannot help you up." "I know," Saribek replied. He slipped. Pain flared, sharp and honest. He did not reach for memory, did not summon lesson. He placed his palm flat against the stone and pushed, standing on muscle and will alone. The basin watched, indifferent but exact. At the center, the paths collapsed into a single circle. The unwarmed waited there, closer now, faces clear. They were not old, not young. They were precise. "You have learned to contain fire," the second said. "You have learned to share it." "Yes," Saribek said. "Would you keep those lessons?" the first asked. "If fire were taken from the world?" The question struck deeper than pain. Saribek closed his eyes. He imagined the desert without glow, without heat thread, without the fire steed's ember presence, only wind, stone, and consequence. "Yes," he said finally, "because the lesson is not fire, it is restraint." The basin stilled. Cold receded slightly, no longer punitive. The third, unwarmed, stepped forward and placed something in Saribek's hand, a small stone, warm only from contact, unmarked, unremarkable. "This is not power," they said. "It is proof." "Of what?" Saribek asked. "That you will choose the same thing when no one is watching." The basin released him. The paths flattened. The cold withdrew to neutrality. When Saribek returned to the corridor, the fire steed lifted its head at once. Its mane brightened, not flaring, not celebrating, but acknowledging reunion after absence. Saribek rewound the heat thread around his wrist. It felt lighter now, obedient rather than insistent. The unwarmed did not follow. Their task ended where fire could return. Saribek mounted. Ahead, the land opened toward a horizon neither bright nor dark, a balance waiting to be decided. He knew the final trial would not be against flame, wind, or oath. It would be against legacy. Chapter 12 Finale. The fire that remains the horizon did not declare itself. It emerged as balance, a line where neither heat nor cold dominated, where wind passed without correction. Saribek rode toward it with the fire steed at a measured pace, aware that finales were not arrivals but settlements. Legacy, he had learned, was not what followed you. It was what you left able to stand without you. The land opened into a broad plain, scored by old channels, now dry. Here, fires had once been guided, then forgotten. Stones lay arranged in partial rings, interrupted by time and choice. This was where traditions ended, not with ruin, but with neglect. The fire steed slowed, mane dimming to a calm glow that asked rather than told. Figures waded across the plain, those Saribek had met along the way, and others he had not. Counters from the measure, artisans from the city of heat, riders who had learned restraint late, elders whose bowls no longer steamed. They did not form ranks. They stood where they belonged, each near a channel they understood. At the center, a shallow depression held a scatter of coals, cold, gray, undecided. No basin framed them. No gate remembered them. This was the last test, whether fire would be summoned or allowed. An elder stepped forward, her voice carrying without heat. "We will not ask for an oath," she said. "We will watch a choice." Saribek dismounted and walked alone to the coals. He felt the heat thread at his wrist loosen, offering no guidance. He remembered the unwarmed and their stone, proof without promise. He remembered the road that refused, the city that breathed, the gate that recalled words once withheld. All of it pointed here to a moment that could not be repeated. He knelt and placed the unmarked stone beside the coals. "Fire remembers agreements," he said, "not to persuade, but to clarify. So we will give it one it does not need to keep." He did not strike flint. He did not feed fuel. He opened the channels with his hands, clearing sand and debris with deliberate care. Others joined without being asked, each tending a section they recognized. The fire steed stepped forward and lowered its head, mane dimming further until it barely lit the work. Fire would not lead this. When the channels were open, Saribek stood back. Wind moved through the plain, gentle and indifferent. The coals did not ignite. They warmed slightly, then cooled. The plain waited. A murmur rippled in certainty, then understanding. Fire would come later, if needed, and it would find its way without spectacle. What mattered now was that the paths existed. The leader, who had once ridden with torches, stepped forward, empty-handed. He knelt and pressed his palm to the ground. "I will return what I take," he said simply. No flame answered. None was required. The elder nodded. "Then the legacy is not his," she said, gesturing to Saribek. "It is ours." Saribek felt the truth of it settle. The heat thread slipped free from his wrist and fell to the ground, thinning to nothing. He felt no loss. The fire steed's mane brightened one last time, not as a sign of ownership, but of completion, then settled into an ordinary warmth, like breath on a cold morning. As dusk approached, Small fires kindled across the plain, modest and well-placed. They did not flare. They did not compete. Heat flowed along the channels, shared and sufficient. Children watched and learned where to stand. Elders corrected without command. The desert did not object. Saribek mounted for the last time. The fire steed turned with him toward the open horizon, where paths no longer needed marking. He did not look back. Legacy does not require witness. They rode until the fires behind them became stars against the ground, then indistinguishable from the sky. At the edge of sight, the fire steed slowed and stopped. It lowered its head, breath steady. This was where their road ended, not because it could not continue, but because it should not be followed. Saribek dismounted and rested his hand on the horse's neck. The warmth there was natural now, unremarkable, human in scale. He felt gratitude without ceremony. The fire steed stepped away, then turned, mane dim, eyes calm. It did not vanish. It simply belonged elsewhere. Saribek continued on foot, carrying no fire, no thread, no symbol, only the habit of choosing restraint when no one asked. The desert accepted him as it accepted all who learned its measures. Behind him, fires burned as needed. Ahead, the night waited, patient and exacting. Fire, at last, remained where it belonged.